how do we allow those opportunities? Because, you know, we always talk about this idea of students having agency in the classroom. And I often hear the conversation is like, we're doing this to give them agency. And that's not really, like, they have agency. It's not that they don't have it. We just don't necessarily have ways for them to kind of like bring it into the work that we do. So does anyone maybe hear like a couple of thoughts, like, what are our thoughts? How do we build this into our work so that they can be successful?
I know that when I was a student, speaking up like in front of the whole class and everybody's eyes on me was really intimidating and very scary. I was a very shy kid, and I know there's a lot of kids in that situation. So I think still giving students the opportunity to speak, but maybe in like smaller groups or just with a partner or someone they're comfortable with, so that they're still processing and getting the chance to speak, but maybe not in such a big scale, like intimidating kind of situation.
That really cuts down on the pressure, doesn't it? In an opportunity like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, so like I'm the youngest of three, so I would always get my hand-me-down stuff from my brother and my sister. And so like it was interesting, like going into classes that, you know, you were expected to have like the newest version of a TI calculator. And, like I would always have the old version. And so things that weren't really up to date. And so like as a teacher, you could provide those resources, have extras, because it was kind of always, you know, kind of embarrassing when you're like, hey, can I go look at your calculator with you? You know, like trying to figure out these things that they want you to do, you know, so trying to think along those lines as well. You know, if some person just has a regular, you know, computer type calculator versus like, oh, I've got the graphing calculator that you need, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. The whole calculator debate is interesting, but luckily now there are so many open source, like free options that exist that hopefully, it's tough. They still, like, textbooks still say pull out your TI 80 or 90, whatever. But there are definitely ways to get around that now, thank goodness.
In my own experience teaching the GBT class at UC Denver, I've definitely found that my students have like a lot of knowledge that I do not have. And so I am finding that I'm learning from them while we're in class. And oftentimes I'll just open it up to a class discussion where we're exchanging ideas, and I won't even be talking for like 15 minutes sometimes. And that's not so hard at all. Just guiding the discussion where appropriate, asking like questions to challenge their learning. Definitely students have a lot to offer.
Exactly. And so how we bring that out, how we allow for that in our classrooms, allows for them to kind of feel like they're more like a scientist or a mathematician. Yeah, these are all excellent points. Thank you all for sharing. I do want to quickly, I see that Diane's coming in here in a second, but I do want to quickly show you a very quick version that I made. This is an older version of the identity journey map, or story maps in general. Diane's going to be bringing you up to speed with kind of what the new versions that I think are a lot easier to kind of think about and use are. Hi, Diane. And so, yeah, I'll do a very quick show, and then I will turn it over to the expert. And so the way that I thought about like the idea of the identity journey map was to really dive into like having the chance to be able to really use the different features of StoryMap, but also talk about like where my math learning kind of went. And so I started off, I was able to pull in a map, and I actually, this was the house that I grew up in. And so I started off just kind of giving a bit of a background of who I am and where I came from. There's a lot of like music is a major part of what life is like in East Coast Canada. So I gave some examples of kind of some famous musicians from back home. And then I was able to kind of switch over to a map and talk about these are the places where I did a lot of my learning. I put in a picture, that was me on was that my wedding day? Yeah, that was my wedding. And I kind of had some chances to even add, you know, talking about my own scenarios with math trauma. And I think I added in here a little flip grid, like what were your thoughts on math and learning? So people can go and leave some reflections. So as you can kind of see, it gives a chance to be able to add some pictures, some maps, really kind of like dive in and be able to give a full explanation of who I was and how that connected to who I was as a mathematician. And that's the idea of this identity journey map. And I want to make sure that we can answer some questions at the end about the assignment. I hope you all had a bit of a chance to dive in and do a quick look again before we get going today. But what I would love to do is introduce you all to Diane Fritz from the Auraria Library. Are you ready to go, Diane?
Yep, I believe so. You know how these things work. There will be some problem, but we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for being able to come and chat with us all today. And I look forward to seeing what you're up to.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. I love maps and doing things with visual design and graphics. And so with that, I'm gonna go into a little bit of a PowerPoint first, but I just kind of wanted to set some understanding of questions because there will be questions because I have a lot to share with you. And when I'm presenting, I'm not going to be able to see all of your faces, so I won't be sure if you're stuck or lost. So I invite you to just unmute yourself and go, whoa, wait, if you are confused about something, because that probably means most people are confused about it. But if you don't want to be verbal, I'm going to ask Dennis to keep his eye on the chat a little bit, and we can either hold some of those questions for closer to the end, or if it seems like something that should be addressed, then Dennis, feel free to interrupt me. Does that sound good?
So absolutely, if you do have a question or if you need to halt, just type. I'm going to be in charge of the chat box, and so if you have any questions, just type in there and let me know, and we'll keep going.
All right. So the first thing that I want to do is, wow. Just introduce the concept of StoryMaps to everybody, but I'm doing it with the PowerPoint kind of on purpose. But this is a PowerPoint, StoryMaps. They're a different way to share presentations, but in this case for this assignment, this is going to be developing your own narrative of your identity and who you are. So it's a really good tool for that. But I want to emphasize it's a different way to do all sorts of kinds of presentations. So first of all, who am I? I am the Geospatial Services Specialist at Auraria Library. And this is my email address up here. And if you have any questions after this session is over, specifically about the technology that we're going to be looking at, please do contact me. There is a website that has a lot of good support for finding data that can help you make these maps and things like this. Honestly, the best way to find this URL is to just Google geospatial and Auraria and it will come up, but I can also give this slide deck to you so that you can have this for reference.
Thanks.
StoryMaps or scrollytelling is a more kind of engaged, fun way of sharing a story than just a PowerPoint. So this is a really boring kind of PowerPoint slide, but it doesn't have to be, because I don't know if you've ever looked at some of the news articles from the Washington Post or New York Times, and you find yourself scrolling through websites and seeing all sorts of amazing imagery. And these are tools that help you do that kind of thing. So the one that we're going to look at today is Esri's StoryMaps. But I just wanted to point out really quickly that there are other technologies that help you do this. There's an open source one called Night Lab StoryMaps. There's a company called Mapbox that goes with the term scrollytelling, and they have a kind of base way of doing it. And the more you use their platform, then you might want to like bump up to a subscription level with them. But there are different tools for doing this. So I just wanted to be clear that those exist. But so today we're going to be looking at the Esri story maps. And there are public and licensed accounts. And I gave everybody an email to a licensed account. Did anybody have any issues with that? Did that work out okay? Or have you tried to access it yet? Just some nods. Did people see that, those, that email? Yeah, good, okay, great. So what we're going to do today is use that licensed account, and it's from a company called Esri, or you will hear people say ESRI. And they have a lot of different applications, and we're going to look at two different ones today. We're going to be looking at StoryMaps, and we're going to be looking at ArcGIS Online. And StoryMaps is the thing that's going to help you build this narrative. ArcGIS Online is a specific thing that will help you make more fancy maps to insert into the StoryMaps. So Esri is this company that has all these different applications, and you'll see these different symbols for the different kind of applications that they have. Their website is a little crazy to navigate, but if you think about just these two URLs of going to storymaps.arcgis.com or arcgis.com to get to the two different applications that we're talking about today, then you'll be good, you'll be solid. Right, so before we dive into how to do this, I just want to show you some examples of some really nicely done story maps. Dennis just showed you one that he created from with this particular assignment in mind. I am just going to pull some ones that came from the gallery that ERSI has on their website that you can check out at any time. So these get beyond just PowerPoints because you can add so much into them. So this is an example of a title from a project that has to do with arid ecosystems in Israel. And as you can see, it's not just an image, you can embed videos into these. And so Esri will give you hints about, okay, there's this big arrow here, I should scroll down. And so it becomes this immersive storytelling tool. So you can add text blocks, you can add another image coming in, and then have some of your words floating over the top of it. And it's just a really interesting way for people to interact with the story that you're trying to tell. And even though it's called story maps, you don't have to use a map ever. You can just add pictures and do a good narrative to talk about it. But this is a really good tool for interacting with web maps, which is what we're going to use ArcGIS Online for. So as I continue scrolling down in this particular story, they have a map of arid areas on the planet. And we don't quite know what these colors are yet, but the way they chose to describe it is that they color-coded their text along with information in that map. So we're kind of getting that sense. You can jump to a next slide. So they've zoomed in to a different part, sort of like Dennis was just showing, this is the house I grew up in, and maybe he could zoom in or zoom out from the town that he grew up in to kind of give a little bit more background of who he is. So you can do all sorts of really great things by embedding pictures into these sidebars and just adding in all sorts of different pieces. So this is kind of a really neat one. Here's a more simple one that does give a story about a person who grew up in Cambodia and decided to try and move around to start a farm. And so there's a kind of a nice introduction photograph so we know who the person is. And then the map shows up, gives a little bit of a story about where she was born and what area. But then you can add on these kind of just like guiding arrows that kind of give you this sense of movement on the map and where this person traveled. And so I'll show you how to do this if this is something that you're interested in. So that's an option for the kind of story building that we're going to be looking at. There's a whole bunch of different ones. I don't know if you can see all of the tabs that I have open, but there are so many out there that you can explore. And if you go to Esri's site and say, I want to explore your gallery of story maps, there's so many different ones where, so this one is about osprey migration and using satellite imagery, not just drawn maps, to show some context for this bird and what her world looked like, being able to filter into things like that. There are different styles that you can add in. So these ones are all kind of scrolling right now, and the new ones, they all have that sort of scrolling feature, but you can add subsets in it where you might have a map like this about different abandoned islands, and then you can kind of click around so that you'll have different places to go to. So here is an island that is off the coast of the US that is abandoned because it basically got eroded and the houses are now kind of going underwater. And you can go down, look at the story a little bit about this marshy island getting overrun, and then switch images out that are in this sidebar and kind of see, oh yeah, that land is disappearing. Or we can look at the reason why this island is abandoned over here. This one is a little disturbing because it is completely infested with poisonous vipers, and nobody lives there because there is a viper about every square meter on this island. People tried inhabiting it one time and that just did not work out. So you can tell really interesting stories like this with different formats of Esri's story maps. So one that is done in the modern style, there are crazy people out there. This woman cycled to the South Pole. And so this is kind of your example title with a background photo that got added in. If we scroll down, we'll notice that there is a different behavior that starts happening. Our photo stays still and we can see all of this different content going by on the side. This is something called a sidecar. And you can change each slide. You'll notice these little dots can change a photo or add a map in here and continue your story however you'd like. So let's go ahead and dive into what this looks like a little bit more when you go into StoryMaps. So that URL that I was talking about was storymaps.arcgis.com. And when you get there, you will see something that looks a little bit like this. If you go there without logging in, you'll just see kind of like a front page that says, welcome to StoryMaps. And then you'll see a little sign in the upper corner. And if everybody goes ahead and does that right now, then you can kind of play along with me while we go through this.
And so let us know if you have any issues logging in as you get set up, either in the chat box or speak it.
So after I get to a place like this, I would click New Story. And it's really kind of a nice template that they build for you. So it gives you a lot of hints to as you build and go through it. So it's a really nice interface. So while people are logging in, I'm going to go ahead and show you this very silly kind of story map that I built that just basically talks about the structure of what you can build in here. So I called it Esri Story Maps and wrote silly things like where you can put that subtitle. I can put a subtitle in here for this public version of Story Maps. So right now I am in my account and I'm in editing mode. And so that's why it's giving me all of these little hints about things that I can do. Like I can switch panel placement, which means my title might drop lower down from my picture, but I like having it more in that blue sky. So it's going to give me these hints of how to build this. If I click the preview button, then it's going to show me what it would look like as a finished product. So I can go back and forth between these two modes.
How's everyone doing? Are we getting there? Any questions? Cool.
Okay. So when it first starts, it'll say add your photo or video. You can put all sorts of great things back behind this story. So I have just this exact same photo that I used over and over again in this story map, and I put it back here behind my background. So when I click on it, it's going to just have me browse to my folders, and I can drop that in. So if I get rid of this one here and I say delete, yes, I don't want that. And then I've got that add image or video. And it's going to ask me, I can drag and drop, or I can browse to, and I can have a folder that will show me just the kinds of files that I'm allowed to put in there. And I'm just going to put that same photo right back in there. It's taking a little bit. When you're in the edit mode, you can click directly in these text boxes and change things and say like, oh, that other word, I didn't really mean that, because they're great. But you can type right in there directly. And then when you scroll down below your title, you'll see this little plus button. And when you click on that plus button, this is when it opens up all the different things that you can add below your title and start building your story. And so what I've done here is I've kind of gone through and shown what it's like if you add a paragraph or a bolded list or a heading or subheading. There are buttons and separators that you can add in. There are image contents like an image video block. And then there are these different kinds of structures of how to add content into that story map. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and say here, this is where I just clicked on, I'm going to click on a paragraph, and I could just start typing in text, and I was able to add that in. And between each block in that editing mode, you'll see that little plus sign show up. And so here, I wanted to add a bulleted list, and it gave me the option to start typing in anything that I wanted into that space. So you can click on one of those buttons and add a heading. You can add something that looks like a quote. You can do a numbered list, subheadings. They kind of prepare a lot of things for you. That's just really nice. The buttons are really kind of interesting because this might draw your attention to a particular thing. So maybe in this, you wanted to add a hyperlink to it instead of just having text there. And so you wanted to add something with a little bit more pop to it. This is something called a separator, and that can give your reader a sense that you're changing subjects a little bit now, or just some kind of content change. And then here, you can add a visual block, and that's kind of what I was calling all of these things. You can have an image, video, map. Right now, I am logged into a public account, so this audio piece is not available to me, but with a licensed account that everybody just logged in with, you should be able to load audio files up there too if you want to listen to something as part of your narrative. So one of the things that I can add in this visual block is a map. So right here is an example of where I took that photo. It's a map of where this photo is, and I added a little pop-up to it so that I can see that. So if I'm clicking on this button and I go to map, go ahead and ignore all of those colorful things under there right now. We'll get to that in a bit because that's the ArcGIS Online part. But right here, if I click on New Express Map up here in the corner, I can build a map directly into my story map. And that's how I did that one that you just saw. So this is a kind of prepared but very simple way to add a map. It has a lot of drawing tools. So if I want to add a point into a particular place, I can click on this tool and say, I want to be saying something about the US. And so I'm going to add that point right there. And then over on the side, I can add an image that's associated with that point and write a description. And that's that pop-up that you saw, that where the picture came up on my other map. I can also draw lines. I'm not sure my, I have a little bit of a delay. So it's a little slow in my system right now, but I can draw a line if I want to draw something to bring attention to something, or I can also draw an area. I can also add annotations and directly add text on here. So there's a lot of flexibility with these express maps, and I can do it directly in here if I want to do something that's kind of drawn and pretty simple, and use these styled layers that the story maps have already done for me. I'm going to click cancel on this, so I'm not adding this one to my map, but that is what I used to build this one right here that has, this is the Rocky Mountain National Park Alpine Visitor Center, and I zoomed into this particular spot to show where that was. So that's what it looks like when you embed a map, but I can also embed just an image or a video, like straightforward in this as well. So before we go forward, I think just playing a little bit with trying to do one of those might be a fun thing right now. I'll give you a little moment to just play around with that and see if you have any questions.
How did you say that we do the, like once we make a change, how can we see that what someone else that's looking at it would see? I guess preview it. Oh, the preview at the
Yeah,
top.
it's
Okay.
this preview button up at the top. Yep, exactly.
All right. Thank you.
And then it sounds like Austin hasn't been able to log in yet.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm at the Auraria Library.maps.arcgis.com home page, and then so like I went to the side with the I don't know, the 3x3 grid where you can choose the story maps option, and then it just says internal server error.
Huh. Okay. How about, can you just go directly to, did you go directly to storymaps.arcgis.com? Maybe try going in that way.
And that link is there, the hyperlink, not the first one I posted, but the one down the road is there if you're able to go there first.
Oops.
Yeah, that link also just says internal server error.
I'm getting that error as well. Like I'm on the homepage and I can see like everybody else, like all the story maps you have shown, but I can't like create anything or add my own because it says server error.
This is an interesting one for me. Is it, and did you try clicking the sign in and there wasn't it prompted you for the your name underscore Auraria
Yeah,
Library?
so I'm signed in and everything. It's not
Okay.
like we're not signed in. It's just you can't create or like add anything is what it looks like. It says an error when you try to do it.
Is anyone successfully logged in?
Okay, I logged in, but I don't know where I should start. My name is there on the side from Auraria, but I didn't get this page.
Well, let's see if we can figure out the login thing, and then I saw your comment in the bottom there, Misha, and we'll try to get you up and running too. But it sounds like a couple of folks are in there. I don't know if it'd be possible. Maybe could we let Aubrey share the screen for a second, Diane, so we can see what's happening with her?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
So
Aubrey, are you good with how to share a screen?
Yeah, I'm logged in. I'm trying to get it on the right one. I'm trying to show you. How do you share screen? Is it working?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So then you would hit create, right? Because it says I'm logged in up here.
So
you go ahead, Diane.
This is, yeah, no, this is perfect. So this is the organization that you have joined that gives you licensing to do mapping, but this is not the story maps directly. So eventually, as you create content, you'll be able to see it here, but to create a new story map, go ahead and go up to the Auraria Library URL space and type in story maps.
Like up here or just?
In actually the place where the URL is showing up, where it says
okay.
library.maps, yeah.
Yeah.
And type in storymaps.arcgis.com and hit return. So it's not even letting you get to that website.
Yeah, because even if I went back, you can try to access it from here. Like if you hit create or something, and like here, and you went to story maps.
Yeah, that should work
still
too. But
yeah.
Let's try. This is something that is on the Esri server end, so it's not something that you're doing wrong or that I'm sure that I can fix quickly. But let's try and go log out from here. So go to your username and go to sign out.
Okay.
And then go back to the URL at the top and type the same storymaps.arcgis.com. And then let's go ahead and click sign in, yeah, and see if what happens when you try going in this way.
Okay. And the username is the one you emailed us, right?
Correct.
Mm,
So it should be your name _ Auraria Library, yeah.
I'm sorry. I can't.
Thanks for
Yeah, sorry.
no, this is important.
Yeah.
That's why we wanted to have
But
this
if-
part
if-
of the.
Okay.
Hey.
There we go.
And then click new story. This is a
You say
better
start
way
a story or up here?
they're both the same. They go
Oh,
to
okay.
the same link, so it doesn't matter.
Austin, were you kind of similar boat? Have you tried to?
Yeah, I'm trying to do what you just did right now.
Yeah, so that is the way that I would recommend. And as I said, Esri's website and all of their applications are not built in a very easy to navigate way. So just thinking about those two different URLs that were on the my PowerPoint, the storymaps.arcgis.com, and then this one.
And so Misha, I want to make sure I come back. I'll make sure you're in a second, Austin. What was your question?
Who's me?
Yep. Didn't you were talking about starting a story? Are you're
Yeah,
good now?
I'm good. No, I'm good now. I got it.
Great.
I'm on that page. Okay.
Okay, great.
Great.
Excellent. So, kind of back to this example one that I'm editing, but as you start, it should be completely blank like this with prompts, and then adding a content block. So it's nice because it's this really kind of great tutorial, and it builds all of these prompts in for you. And everything up here is ways of adding text, some visual graphic separators, and then these are the image blocks. And so we were down to this point where trying to add a map in, and how does that look? So there is one other thing about the maps that their styles seem kind of constrained in here, but I'll show you how to change that a little bit. But let's go ahead and look at these maps and try and add one. So I'm going to add another map here. I'm going to click on New Express Map because we'll get to those other ones with ArcGIS Online. And if I want to zoom into a certain thing, I can scroll in with my mouse and then click and drag and say, I want to look at Colorado like this. So navigating and clicking and dragging the map is something that I'm pretty used to because I do a lot of things with maps, but that might take a little bit for you to get used to with your mouse. And so whenever I want to do that, I want to be on this select tool because that will help me navigate around. Using a scroll wheel, or if you're on a Mac, you can drag with the fingers in and out. And I can hover over these things and it will give me a hint about what they are. So if I want to say draw an area and I want to just sort of have a little highlighted rectangle over Grand Junction, I can click once each time to create a node and double click on the last one to make it finish. And that's the same if I'm drawing a line. I'll click once to draw a node and double click on the last one to finish it. So I can do all sorts of hand addition graphics to this kind of base map that I have. And then I can add an image. And I'm going to go back to my Rocky Mountain National Park Alpine Visitor Center. Have it there. And then I can click done. And then when I go back to where I'm editing, then I now see this map showing up in my StoryMaps scrolling space. And when I click on this, it'll expand it as a viewer, and I can shrink it back in. These little bars that are over here, if I ever make something where I use these little plus signs and I add something in and I don't like where it is, I can hover over this and drag it and put it up above this other map that I made. And it will kind of give me this little bar to be like, oh, this is where you want it to go. And it will reorder my things within my story map that way. Also, when I hover over it, it can give me that tool if I want to go back in and edit this map. If I want to make it a little bit smaller, I can click on that and I can shrink the size that the map is taking up in the space that's going over. I can also make it be this, what they call float, where it kind of goes to the side. And then I can add other things elsewhere. So there's all sorts of different kinds of tools for creating these express maps in here. And you'll notice that there's a certain color scheme that's happening that I haven't really seen any tools to change what it looks like. But if I go back up to the very top here where it says design next to that preview, what they do is that they've provided these kind of default ways that you don't have to make too many decisions about this, and you can pick a theme and say, I want this to be in a summit theme, or I want it to be in ridgeline or mesa. And if I change these, if I click that, then it's going to change the look of all of my maps and all of my text all at once. So now all of a sudden I have a background for my map that might be a little bit more appropriate for this kind of style of map that I have, since I'm talking about mountains up in Rocky Mountain National Park. So this next part is really interesting. We talked about these image blocks that you can have. And now I want to touch about what these different slideshows and swipe and sidecar and guided tour looks like. These are different kinds of ways of presenting your material within the overall scrolling piece. So I call them different story formats. And Esri had started making a whole bunch of different kinds of story maps, and now they're shoving them all into one space, and they're adding that functionality all into the same menu. So this one is a sidecar format, the first one that I've added in. And so that one of the woman biking to the North Pole, where there was that picture of her at the beginning of a bike race, and then the text started floating next to her, that's what this one is. So I put my photo over here, and you'll notice as I keep scrolling down, the picture stays still. So I have plenty of room to write all the text that I want to write about this. It's called this narrative panel over on the side, and my media panel over here where the image is staying still. This can be a photograph, it can be a map, it can be a video. It's the same thing as those image panels before. And if I keep scrolling down, you'll notice these two dots down in the corner. I have 2 slides associated with this sidecar story. So when I get to the second one, my media has changed to a map. So I switched what was happening in my media panel while I keep writing text about it in the narrative panel. I can also add images in the narrative panel, because in here, those little buttons of adding content keep showing up. The only thing that's missing now are those different story formats, because I'm within one of those story formats right now. So I can keep adding text, and I can add images and all sorts of things in this space. I can even add another little map. So if I want to give kind of a locator map of like, where actually is this Rocky Mountain National Park area, and this green square is kind of represented of the map that I had up above. So I'm kind of going backwards. It's like, okay, this is where she's talking about. She's in Colorado, because that's one thing about maps. It's important to give your reader information about what is that marker actually representing? Where is it? So that's what a sidecar story format looks like. And if I'm adding one and I just add a brand new sidecar, it will give you a little tutorial about how to step through it. And it talks about all the different kinds of things you can do with it. But if I skip that, then it gives you that docked panel, which we were just looking at, or you can have a floating panel like the Israeli story that we were looking at, where the text was floating across the media. So you can choose either one. So if I pick floating panel, then my narrative panel is in here, and my media is going to cover the whole thing. So if I add a photograph here, and here, then I can start typing my story. So I think they have improved a lot the way you build these things, and I'm pretty impressed with that. They have that sidecar one. Slideshow is one where when the reader gets to it, they'll see this big arrow on the side, and then they'll see these 2 or 3 or however many slides that you have, and they will click through the visuals that you have put there. So slideshow format is one where there isn't a lot of words really, but you just want to have a lot of great images perhaps, or maybe have a map in there. So I made another map for this space, just kind of showing where Colorado is in the United States. So that's how the slideshow one works. If I go out of slideshow and try the guided tour version, this one will let me have different points on a map and associate things in my narrative panel with each point. And so that's where the Alpine Visitor Center really is. Estes Park is the town that you go through to get there. And then Denver is the city that you fly into to get to that space. So you can kind of give people this process and the map will move with those different points. So that's what the guided tour story format looks like. And then this last one that they have in there, so if I'm adding a story, we've looked at slideshow, we've looked at sidecar and guided tour, and then there's this other one called swipe, but we can't really do anything with that unless we figure out what ArcGIS Online is. So that's the next thing that I want to talk about. So now, instead of being at storymaps.arcgis.com, this is where you would go to arcgis.com and sign in and then click on map, and you would get to this space. Before we go here, does anybody have any questions about the StoryMaps build at this point?
I have a few questions actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So with what you're showing, kind of those different mediums, can you interchange between them? So could you like start with the sidecar and then move into a slideshow, or does it all have to be kind of the same exact thing as you go along?
So those are different. Anytime you see one of the buttons show up right here,
Okay.
you're allowed to add in a different one. So right above this, I've only added text and images. And down here, this is where I've added in a sidecar.
Okay.
And then I can switch. I'm just scrolling, I'm scrolling, and then all of a sudden I've gone into my slideshow one. So you can go back and forth between them.
Awesome. And then another question, would you be able to like embed kind of like maybe say like if you want people to look at a map or an image, like in the background have like a song be playing and that just is specific for that slide, and then to the next one the song would end, or like, you know, if you're trying to personalize it a little bit more?
Yes, you can. So there is the embed options and the audio options, so you can put those in. There is, let's see, there's a good example. I'll just tell you, it's called Sounds of the Wild West. I don't think I have it bookmarked right now, but there's a really great one that somebody did that has the sounds of Yellowstone and different kinds of bird noises and grizzly bear noises, and they, every time you moved from an image of one thing to another, the sound of that item was joining it. So you can, yes.
I have a quick question. If you wanted to add audio that you record yourself, do you record it through this website, or do you have to have already recorded it and then bring it in?
Bring it in.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be loading up an audio file. So it looks for files that it can add in.
Okay. Is there like a certain app we should do that with or anything, or it doesn't matter as long as it's in the right file?
It's, yeah, it's just about the file format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So for this next piece, there's a lot to pay attention to. And the PDF that I sent, the handout of how to go through ArcGIS Online is kind of a neat little thing to step through. So I encourage you to look at that while we're looking at this next application from Esri. And I am trying to see where mine is right now. So I want to share with you. Not coming up.
I do also just kind of want to mention, so like this is kind of the next level of things that you can be able to do. So everything that we've talked about so far and what you've been playing with so far is definitely enough to be able to kind of dive into the story maps and work on the identity journal map. However, this is kind of, I think, kind of where it also starts to get interesting when, if you all want to kind of dive into some more of the stuff. And Misha just asked if we are recording this session, and I'm going to double check, but yes, I am. And I'll be posting that on today's, so in Canvas, the face-to-face 2 day, where it says materials, I'll upload this to YouTube and add a link to everything that we've been talking about, so that you all have something to kind of go back and look at.
Great, thanks. So when we got to that last option down there, it was asking, hey, can you add a web map instead of that express map building thing? And so before, when I was clicking on add a map and you saw some other things pop up, those options were often maps that I had already built in ArcGIS Online. And so this interface right here is where I can start doing that. So I'm going to click over into this other account that I have, because I have been working in a public one for a while. So here I'm going to say that I want to start a story. And I'm going to say that I want to add that swipe beta style. And so here's where it says add a web map, and it's not giving me that option to put in an express map. And I am still in the wrong account. I knew it would do that. This is the other thing that's kind of weird about these things. It's like I tell it that I want to switch and it doesn't do it right away. There we go. So I am starting my story map. I want to add in a swipe. And I want to add in a web map. And these are some other web maps that I had built in this other account. And so I'm going to add this satellite forestry one here. And this is one that I've pre-built. I'm going to show you how to do this in ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to click Place Map. And here I'm going to add another one that has similar content, but it's a little bit different, because what I've done is I've pulled in different kinds of data. And so now what this swipe map thing is going to do is going to give me an opportunity to look at forest coverage on the Front Range around Rocky Mountain National Park. So what I've done is in this map, I've loaded a satellite imagery layer and the boundary of the forest management. And this one over here, I've loaded a data set that talks about the kinds of trees that are in that space or in that forest. So I can actually interact with this and zoom in and see those places where I took that photo in Estes Park and look at a comparison of what these two maps are like. But these are those web maps that ArcGIS Online can help us build. So how do I do that? So if you look at that handout sheet that I gave you, it'll give you instructions about how to get here, going to arcgis.com and signing in. And this is where you'll directly get to be able to see this instead of going to StoryMaps.com. This is the web map interface builder. And if you don't see this, you would click on the map on the top part of your choices. Instead of my content, you would click on map. So I'm going to give you kind of a whirlwind tour of this. I encourage you to play around with this later. but just kind of watch what I'm doing maybe and absorb it, unless you're really good at multitasking and you can try and play along. But one of the first things I might want to do is choose an area, right? So it gives us a little hints about how to do this. It's like, what am I trying to look at? So I can zoom in and say, all right, I want to do Colorado. That's where I want my map focus to be. But maybe I don't want this kind of base map is what it's called. So on the handout, you'll see there's a little button like this that says base map. If I click on this, I can change it to all sorts of different choices that I have up here, including imagery. And so that's where that satellite imagery comes from. I changed that base map. Now I might want to add some information on top of it as well. So this add button allows me to add data layers on top. So this is where I'm kind of building more of a custom map, and I'm doing it with data instead of hand drawing it like we did in the Express Maps. So here, and this is on the handout, it talks about these different ways of adding data. Search for layers is looking in your own account for layers you've already created, so this won't work for you right now. Living Atlas layers is this just a library of amazing fun of things that you can pull down and add in. Or you can also add a layer from a file. So if you have like a spreadsheet with just latitude and longitude on it of things. So let me, for example, if I have this really simplistic spreadsheet of different trees that are like, one's an aspen, one's a ponderosa, one's a fir tree, but it has some location information, a latitude and longitude. And if you want to know how to get this or build this, feel free to contact me. But if I have that, then I can pull that directly into my map by saying I want to add a layer from a file and pull in that CSV that I just showed you. And it's going to give me those dots of where those trees were and kind of automatically draw some things for me. But I can also go into this Living Atlas area and say, I want to search for things that have to do with forest. And this administrative boundaries layer is what I'd pulled in before on that swipe map. So I can click on it and it's going to give me some information about what this looks, what it is. So I can decide whether or not I want to add it. But then if I decide yes, then I can add it in. And then I've got that boundary of where the forest was. So that's how adding data in works here. But I can also add in those hand-drawn things in the same way. So if I add map notes, this is kind of this weird way where you can start drawing in this thing as well. It wants you to name it so that it has a layer for each one, but then it gives you these little widgets. And do you remember those arrows that we saw on that one woman's particular story about being able to kind of add arrows onto things? So I can add one on and I can add a description of what it is and why I want to put that there, but I don't have to if I don't want to. And then I have this arrow that I'm drawing on top of my map that I can manipulate. So that first map that we saw where somebody had this really kind of beautiful map, but then just had some simplistic arrows across the top of it showing where this woman's pathway was, this is how they did that. So after I create something here, oh, I should also mention, this is also where you can add text. So if I want to write something on here in a text color that's better than that so I can actually read it, think about that in your design as well. I can annotate directly here, and I would definitely change that color. But I want to make sure that I leave some time for some quick questions. But here I would click save. Oh. It has you add these things so that you can find it again. Now, if I go back to my space here and I want to add a map to this particular story map, that one that I just created with those little trees is right here, and I can select that. And then it now becomes the map that I am adding into my story map. So if you want to spend more time with some real data as opposed to drawing things, you can go into ArcGIS Online and do a more creative way of building these maps. And I am happy to meet with any of you one-on-one if you want to talk about more details about how to do that. Or if you're just comfortable kind of clicking around, you can't break anything in there. So you can click around in here and see how to adjust things a little bit more carefully. So for example, my trees here, I can click on this and I can see that data that I loaded, that spreadsheet is there. I can be like, oh wait, there are different tree types. Maybe I want to change my symbol based on what those tree types are. So I can play around with that symbology and say, yeah, I want different colors for my different kinds of tree types. And I can change that on the map. So there's a lot of different interactivity that you can do there as well. So big whirlwind about all of that. But like I said, I am happy to respond to any questions that you have via email, or if you want to set up a more careful one-on-one Zoom session to kind of step through some of these things after you get some ideas about how you want to build your narrative about what your story is and how you want to show that in this format, I am happy to do that as well.
I have a question about like the transitions.
Mm-hmm.
That one person who did have the arrows.
Yes.
They started with just their map, and then you kept scrolling down, and then the arrows popped up, but the map didn't change.
Right. So on this one, what they did is that they kept their frame of the map when they were building it in ArcGIS Online exactly the same, but they saved a different map.
Okay.
With a different set of arrows. So right now, that's one map that they built, and then they have a blank one, and then they have another version of a map that they built with arrows moving over here.
Okay.
Those are separate maps that then they loaded, but you can't tell that the background switches because it's exactly the same. So it's kind of like a trick. You may have done this with PowerPoint before, where you have two different slides and you make it animated by changing just one thing on it. Same kind of concept.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to share this other story map, which is kind of over the top GIS, because these people are going with 3D mapping. So Amache is this site where Japanese were interned in the US And there's a project out of University of Denver where they're trying to recreate it. And so they made this story map about that project. And so they have their 3D mapping in this video in this space. But this is kind of an example of how you can build that sidecar story, switch back and forth from images, have different kinds of maps that have pop-up information in them. There's just a lot of capability in this platform, so it's kind of imagination is the limit. So it's something to have a lot of fun with. And like I said, if you're not interested in doing maps necessarily, but you're just have a lot of really great photographs and you want to, or sketches and drawings, this particular one is just done by loading images. I mean, this image is of maps this person created, but mostly this story map is just photos of their family and a lot of text. So you can do that too. Like, so here's that slideshow piece in the middle where they were hopping through a lot of different photos. So you don't have to get involved with geospatial data to use this platform. That's just that kind of extra cherry on top, if you, especially if you want to dive into the ArcGIS Online piece of it as well. But this one's like one of, I think it's amazing. Anyway.
Cool. Thank you so much, Diane, for having a chance to be able to come in and chat with us about the kind of the beginning and then kind of like diving into, you know, the world of ArcGIS Online. I think it's a lot of fun to be able to play with these. And I know, oh, go ahead.
It's a rabbit hole, but it's a good one. There's a lot of things to do in there, and I'm happy to play around with more possibilities if people want me to do that.
And I've actually pretty much moved to, if I give presentations at conferences or things along those lines, I now mostly do them in StoryMaps if it makes sense to. Just because I like the features, and PowerPoint can get kind of a little stale. And then you said you might be able to share the PowerPoint as well from today, as I talked about.
Yeah, I mean it's just basically giving you the actually, you know what I should do? I will give you those. It's only just 4 slides from that PowerPoint, but okay. The thing that's important about it in a way is that when you go to this geospatial services page, so this is my page that I work out of basically in the library. And if you get to the geospatial services page, this is where you can do an ArcGIS Online account request, but I've given that to you as well. But there's different places where you can find data and just kind of sniff around and find all sorts of different places to download data if you want to pull that in. So remember how I was saying you could load it from a file or you can look from Living Atlas? There are all sorts of GIS data available out in the world and on the intertubes. And so this is a good kind of orientation. So if I go to Denver Open Data and I'm just interested in data from Denver, I can go in here and say, just to stick with our theme of trees, they have a tree canopy data set. And you can click on this and pull down the shapefile here and load that into your web map as well, if that's of interest to you. So there are all sorts of ways that you can augment the story that you're trying to tell with different kinds of data that's out there. But the link from the PowerPoint will get you to this geospatial services page from the Auraria Library. And there's some explanations here about what ArcGIS Online is a little bit, and just kind of hints about it and tutorials and resources. Or you can also just click right here, and that email will come to me and I can answer any quick questions you might have. But I'm also happy to make appointments and go over a particular project with you if you'd like.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Diane.
All right. I will send you those PowerPoint slides and enjoy exploring.
Thank you. All right, folks. So what I was thinking about for the rest of today, I want to just quickly bring up the actual the identity journey map assignment, just to kind of quickly talk about it, and so that we can connect it to what we were just kind of going over for the last little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll leave this open so that we can all kind of continue to play, and I'll tell you kind of some of the due dates that are coming up. And so when we finish talking here, if you want to stay on and play, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, when I wrap up here, if you all would rather go off and work on it on your own, or if you have other things to work on, we'll do that. But the whole idea here of this assignment, this very first assignment, is for us to dive into our own content level identity. And so you can kind of see here, like, the purposes are to identify key events, contexts, and people in your life that have shaped your path, to connect events, contexts, and people to important guiding principles that kind of connect to math or science identity, prepare and reflect the meaningful experiences that have driven you to where you are, and then describe how experiences have shaped your attitudes. So the kind of things that I'm looking for is for you to get a chance to use some of this rich content, be it maps, photos, videos, audio clips, to help tell your story, really examine some influential experiences, tell about people who have helped shape your work, and then describe your attitudes, and then to start thinking about, like, what next? Where do we take it next? I also have a rubric in here that kind of talks about the different things that I want you to hit upon. I don't have any like a set number of sections that I want you to do. I want you to just dive into it and play with it. And really, I want you to have fun with it and think about this technology. What I really love about this technology, it's actually, like, Esri technology itself is not cheap. It's a pretty expensive. This is the technology that my wife uses as an urban planner to do all of the work that she does. However, the wonderful thing about Esri, the company, and the work that they do, is they have an entire education wing that gets you thinking about. So there's actually an entire Esri network here in Colorado that does kind of map work connected to strong content standards in math, looking at the way that we use data, and then the same in science. And the education wing is actually housed here in Broomfield. And what the CEO of the company has done is that if you're involved in K-12 education, entire schools are able to use all of this technology for free if you ask. So this is actually a very expensive professional technology that industry standards use, that you'll be able to have at your school if you so wish, for free. And that, I think, is really important when we think about, like, how we use technology. Is it like an educational tool, or is this something that students might actually, like, dig into and dive into? This is actually what I did my dissertation on. So one more quick thing. Do you have any questions about the assignment?
When you say, like, we're supposed to be talking about our, like, identity as, like, a mathematician or a scientist, does that include, like, our history of education in general, or, like, are you looking more for, like, kind of just describing how we have like grown up into like our subject, or just like anything really we want that is in regards to how we like identify as a mathematician?
You bet, all of it. Whatever it is that you, whatever it is, I don't want it to be like, you have to do this, you have to do this. All I want you to do is to take some time to reflect upon, like, what are the things that got me here? And it might have been a teacher, it might not have been, it might have been someone in your community. It might have been something that you did in biology class, or it might have been like, this is the after school program that I was engaged with. It could be really whatever are a couple of important things that have led you to where you are now. And so in terms of due dates for things, I want us to start thinking about this. This assignment itself is due on the 21st. So we have, 10 days to work on this for now. But what I would like for you to do is to play, if you can, a little bit now. And I want you to kind of get like maybe one thing done by Sunday. And then one of the things that you can do is you can actually send a link so that I can take a look at it. So the two things that are due for Sunday, there's a discussion prompt that you'll do that's around looking at your initial thoughts on assessment. And then what I want you to do is I want you to get something done on this project and then send it to me. I'll show you. Why don't I bring those assignments up so that so you can see what I'm talking about. And so I'm not looking for any level of completion for this, but I want you to have a chance to be able to get a chance to play, and so that I can give you a little bit of feedback on some of the things that we're looking at. Share my screen. So you'll see in terms of online session number 1, so for Sunday, there's this formative assessment kind of activity to look through and to write something about. And then there's this assignment where I want you to be able to kind of like write something. And we're actually going to just have you, I initially had this idea of doing a peer feedback thing, but I want to kind of cut down the overall stress and work for you all. I want you to submit your link to this assignment. And at whatever level of doneness it is, so that I can take a look at it and just kind of give you some thoughts and feedback. This is kind of our rough draft talk for this particular assignment. Questions? We have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to leave the Zoom open if you want to kind of play along and ask me questions. If you're done, or if you want to just kind of go off on your own, because this was a whole lot of information kind of thrown at you at once. We can wrap up here as well, and you can go off and do what y'all need to do. Yeah, thank you so much for engaging, and looking forward to our conversations again on Tuesday. And of course, email me if you have any questions, and I'll get back to you quickly. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about what you want for like for references, or like citing the things we're using as far as like videos or audio or pictures?
Sure, yeah, no, that's a good question. Just so that you're covering yourselves in terms of like plagiarism and stuff like that. So you mean in terms of like writing papers?
Yeah, or like, do you want us to email you like our references or anything? Because we're not writing a paper, right? It's like this story map. So is there a place on the story map you want the references?
Yeah, what I would do, so as you could kind of see with the story maps, each idea you'll probably do like a separate one of those panes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you reference an article, leave it within that pane, just kind of at the bottom, just write like a citation for it, or a reference, a bibliographical reference at the bottom in that pane, just so that it's like all there. So kind of like saying, you could even just say like references and then just put that there so that we know like it's connected to that thing, because there's room to do that. Good question.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. And if you still, as I said, if you want to just stick around and play, please do.
Thank you.
Thanks all. I hope it was interesting. It was a lot of information for sure.
It was interesting. It was cool. I like that you were saying you would use this instead of a PowerPoint.
Oh, 100%, yeah. The thing about the problem with me doing it is that it's not free for universities. So the library gets like a certain number of credits that they can use, and how much data you use dictates how many credits. And so I'm kind of a little costly in how I use it. But I love that the CEO of Esri says, you know what, let's make sure that anyone who wants to use this in K through 12 settings, it's free. So any students that want to like do this, it's free. And my wife pays a huge amount of money for her company to use this technology. I love this.
Yeah, we use Google Maps to do ArcGIS stuff, or at least make maps in my class. Do staff have access to it in K through 12 schools?
Yep. So yeah, so when I say like people that are involved, so the teachers and stuff like that have to be able to use it as well, or the TAs and stuff. So, but you have to request, like you have to go through like a process through Esri to request that your school can have access, and once your school can have access, it's totally free. And the person who runs Esri Education is here in Broomfield, and he's a GIS rockstar. He's so helpful. I contact him on the regular. I've been actually working with him since my days in Boston. That's how I get hooked up with all this. My dissertation was having students use GIS tools to think about ways that they can improve their neighborhoods in urban Boston. So yeah, and so they were using these tools to look at like, what do I do with vacant lots where there's like drug dealers and stuff like that happening? Are there things that I can do? And there was some of the projects actually went through the city of Boston and were accepted. It was pretty cool.
Okay.
How are you doing, Misha?
So far, so good. It's a heavy in information, so we say yes now. When we work, we find a lot of the questions. That's why I'm asking if you're recording, so I can back and see.
Yep. No, it's all being recorded. I'm going to stop here recording in a second, and then I'll get that up on YouTube so that it'll be up. And so in like today's face-to-face 2 session, I've already put up the handout that Diane had. I'll add the new ones that she just emailed, and then I'll add a link to this.